I just did a video yesterday with my good friend Dave at No Carb Life, and Mike the Vegan cut a promo on you and saying that
Mhm.
he debunked you,
Yeah.
saying that what you're saying is completely fallacious, and that there's many studies out there showing that meat is carcinogenic and so on and so forth. And
Mhm.
you've had a few people come out and really speak out against you, seeing as how you're gaining a lot of traction with your message. It seems like more people are coming out against you. What do you take, with all that? I mean, it's is it kind of crazy too that you become this kind of internet sensation in the dietary world, and all this criticism coming out against you? What do you have to say to your critics?
Oh, I mean, it's fine to ask these questions. I mean, this isn't something that a lot of people say. And one of the points that Mike the vegan, is it Mike or Mick? It's MIC.
It
So
might be Mick. Yeah, I
okay,
don't
yeah.
know.
Either way, Mr. Vegan, we'll call him. One of the things that Mr. Vegan says is that I go way outside the consensus in science. And first of all, that's an oxymoron. There is no such thing as consensus in science if it's actual science. There's consensus in dogma and religion and cults, and not in science. If it's scientific, there's not going to be a consensus. If there's a consensus, it's not scientific. And so, he's saying, well, this is way outside the scientific consensus. And or me saying that my theory, and that's the whole point. This isn't the consensus. This is my theory, that I've come to, that the majority of modern chronic diseases, are not diseases per se, but a toxic buildup of species inappropriate diet, namely too many plants, and malnutrition as well. So namely too many plants that we haven't evolved on, that we don't have the biomechanics to process and eat safely and get all the nutrition from, and not enough meat that we are evolved to eat. So that is my theory, and that's the whole point. You have to go against the consensus. You have to go against the doctrine and the status quo to make any sort of progress. And that's what I'm hoping to do. I'm hoping to make people shake their head and go, wait, what the hell is he talking about? What is he saying? I want that. I want people to ask questions, and I'm happy with them trying to debunk me. I mean, I don't want to get things wrong. If they all of a sudden come out and go like, well, actually, there's all this stuff, and I just go, damn it, that's shit. He got me. Okay, maybe I have to rethink this stuff. He did not do that. I didn't really see anything that was um, convincing at all. I mean, all the studies that he trotted out were, again, these epidemiological studies that did not compare like to like. They did not compare whole food meat-based diet to a whole food plant-based diet, or they didn't even isolate meat and just take that out and change no other variables. They changed a lot of variables. Maybe they excluded meat, but they also excluded processed food and sugar and processed carbs and all sorts of other junk. There was there was one, when I was just talking about the actual fact that potatoes are nightshades, and they produce something called solanine. And this is why people's mothers may have told them growing up that you have to be very careful with how you keep potatoes. You have to keep them in a dry place, dark dry place, because if they get light exposure, UV light will turn them green. You can't eat them if they're green. They're poisonous. And if they start growing roots, you can't eat them because they're poisonous, or you have to cut out the whole eye. It's not just the root, you have to get the whole eye out. And so that's because there's much more solanine produced if it goes green, because it's like, oh shoot, I'm seeing sun, that means I'm exposed, that means an animal can get me, I got to make more poison. And or the roots are going, it's just like, okay, this is a fresh sprout, something can eat this is vulnerable, I'm going to be more poisonous. So all of those things are facts. And so I was pointing out these facts, and in order to quote unquote debunk that, he trotted out a study that showed, in for it was something like, for the dietary guideline diet, the normal like US dietary guideline diet, so eating the exactly US guidelines, um, eating bagels as your carb source, or potatoes as your carb source. And the people who ate potatoes as their carb source had some sort of mild benefit somehow. And that somehow showed that potatoes were really good for you, which is probably one of the stranger arguments, because you're literally comparing potatoes to bagels. Whoever said that that was what we were looking at? I'm not saying that the bagels are better than potatoes. I never made that claim, and so that study doesn't debunk anything. It's comparing apples to oranges or potatoes to bagels in this circumstance. It's not comparing potatoes to meat, which is what we're actually looking at. Another one that he said, he was talking about, and it sounded like he was trying to be fair, like, well, this is position is actually true that plants use defense chemicals to ward off animals and all these sorts of things. But then he said I was using fear mongering tactics and things like that. And we were talking about a study from that I mentioned from Professor Bruce Ames out of Berkeley in 1989 that said clearly there that it had 42 toxins, 41 toxins, and 20 carcinogens. And he says, oh, but so he's picking some minute trace elements that they give to animals in abundance, and this shows a slight increase in cancer. That's not what the study said. That's not what the study showed at all. He didn't read the study, and so he's just making that claim. And in fact, what the study showed is they actually compared it to what we were talking about at the time, which were the pesticides that they were looking at, because they were saying, hey, these pesticides are bad, they're harmful. And Bruce Ames actually showed that the plants were worse. So he actually showed that there were 10,000 times more naturally occurring toxins in the fruits and vegetables that we were spraying these pesticides on, in this case, alar. And so it's like, okay, well, it has more of them, but maybe they're not as bad. Well, they are as bad, actually. They're actually worse, because you say, well, maybe all the it's just trace elements and not that big a deal and all that sort of stuff. However, and the part that he conveniently left out of his video was a part that I showed where it said that when that the mushrooms, that just normal white mushrooms, were found to be 500 times more likely to cause cancer than the pesticide alar. So, there were a lot of omissions and lies of omissions and sort of direct lies in that sort of takedown. And the sort of the most telling thing, I think that I tried watching it a couple of weeks ago or a few days ago, and I just sort of stopped when he had my video on the screen, and he had it up, and he had my name, Dr. Anthony Chaffee, and he says, yeah, so this is a video by Dr. Andrew Chaffee. It's like,
That's true, yeah.
And that made the final cut, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, this guy's attention to detail is already lacking, right? So if he can't even read my understand what my name is when he's reading it, and it's right in front of him, that, like, what else? I mean, what else is he missing? He's missing a lot, and he and he omitted quite a lot of things. And so I didn't find it very, very convincing at all. They were not comparing like to like. They're not comparing anything we're looking at, and there were all these very flawed studies. They're saying that, oh, you slightly increase this compared to what? What are you comparing it to? Like, oh, when you eat more cruciferous vegetables, compared to what? We eat more legumes, we eat more, compared to what? Compared to people eating absolute garbage. Yeah, exactly. 70% of Americans already eat a plant-based, get 70% of their, 70% of the calories that people get in America are already plant-based, plant origin. So we don't actually eat a majority of meat in America. We eat a majority of plants, carbs, sugar. And it's just that those are mostly processed plants and carbs and sugar. And so going to a whole food 70% plant-based diet, or even 90% plant-based diet, but you get rid of those things that are even worse, is going to be better. And no one's arguing that. I'm certainly not arguing that. But that's what he's trying to argue. He's trying to basically make the claim that that's a processed food diet is a meat diet, a meat-only diet. And so all of these studies are useless. They're meaningless. They don't mean anything because they're completely out of context, and therefore they don't matter. And then he, tries to bastardize and misinform people about what my actual argument was, and omit very key points. But at the same time, hopefully some of these people will be responsible enough or interested enough to actually watch the video and find that it's nothing close to how he portrayed it.
Well, this is coming from someone who advocates eating just egg as a
Okay.
healthy alternative to actual egg. But
Yeah. Oh, right.
and
Jesus.
I recently saw a study showing that 37% of Americans eat fast food on a daily basis. And of
Jeez.
course, the majority of that fast food is going to include some form of meat, right? It's
Mm.
KFC or McDonald's or burgers. I mean, that's what fast food is mostly made up of, tacos. And so 37%, almost, that's nearly
Crazy.
half of Americans are eating fast food daily, which is crazy. So,
Mm.
when I see it, when I, talk about feeding my kids plant foods and stuff like that, I'm like, oh, maybe I should be feeding them plant foods and stuff. But I'm like, okay, they still have a healthier diet than 99.99% of the population, right? And
Yeah.
from my generation, when I grew up on Lunchables and everything, which might explain why I have such bad health issues, but you made it to the big leagues when Dr. Berg covers your video as well. And he talked a little bit in his video about sulforaphane and broccoli
Wow.
sprouts and how, they're actually, you were wrong about that. Can you touch on that just for 1 second and then we'll call it a day, I guess.
Yeah. So with sulforaphane, I mean, look, even if you have one chemical that's good for you, that doesn't mean the plant's good for you. That doesn't mean it's good for you overall. And because it's cherry picking. You're saying, well, there's this one thing in there that's good. Okay, you're talking, if you like it so much and it's so good, put it into a pill, package it, get an exact amount, do the study, say this is the therapeutic range. You need it above here to do any good. You need it below here to not do harm. That's called the therapeutic window. And and you can do that. And we have supplements that do that. And we have medications that do that. Just saying, just eat broccoli and have a random amount of this stuff. Well, you don't know how much is too much. You don't know how much is enough if there is a beneficial amount. But sulforaphane specifically, I mean, that is like a horrendous toxin that the is so toxic that the broccoli plant doesn't even keep it in its intact form. It has it's in pieces. Basically, it has two chemicals that then once it's crushed, you have this maceration like an animal chewing it. It actually releases these chemicals and they have a chemical reaction, they bond and they make that sulforaphane. So it's so toxic that it can't even keep it in its own tissue. And so so and so some of the things some of the arguments that would be said about it would be, well, it increases your anti-inflammatories and all these different cytokines and things like that are good for it's bolstering your immune system. Well, why is it bolstering your immune system? Is it signaling your immune system to just be better, or is it mounting an immune response to the sulforaphane to try and get it out of your body? And that's exactly what
Exactly.
it's doing.
Yeah.
It's mounting an auto or antioxidant response and an immune response to then go and clear the sulforaphane out of your body, and that's what it does. And so, we're just sort of putting the cart before the horse. We're attributing causation to correlation. We're saying, hey, look, these things go up, and those things are good, but that doesn't mean that that it's triggering those things in a beneficial way, apart from benefiting you by getting sulforaphane the hell out of your body, which I would say is a good thing.